Hello and welcome to lesson 90 of the Learning Guitar series. In this lesson, we're going to look at the fourth mode of the harmonic minor family, and it's called Dorian Sharp 4 or Dorian Sharp 11. Let's look straight away into the PDF, which discusses some of the harmony theory behind it, and then of course there is all the scales, arpeggios, and chords connected to this particular scale. So the Dorian Sharp 11 is the fourth mode derived from the harmonic minor scale, and it's an interesting one for a variety of reasons. First, the presence of a sharp 11 is reminiscent of the Lydian mode, the fourth degree of the major modes. So we can think of a Dorian sharp 11 as a minor scale, but with the Lydian flavor. Also, the scale includes the intervals 1, flat 3, 5, and flat 7, which suggests its application to minor chords. As the name implies, the Dorian sharp 11 can also be viewed as a variation of the Dorian mode, the second degree of the major scale. It preserves the characteristic sonic qualities of Dorian, particularly the flat 3 and major 6, while adding a more exotic touch via the raised fourth, or also called the sharp 11. As we know, sharp 4, sharp 11, and flat 5s are different ways of describing the same note. If we consider the sharp 4 as a flat 5, we can also interpret this mode as containing the intervals 1, flat 3, flat 5, flat 7, which spells an half diminished chord. This makes the scale appropriate for use over half diminished chords, especially in the context of a minor 2-5-1 progression, where the 2 chord is typically half diminished. Additionally, the scale includes the interval 1, flat 3, flat 5, and 6, which spells a diminished chord, although academically the sixth would be defined as a double flat 7, so this arpeggio will be 1, flat 3, flat 5, double flat 7, which spells diminished chords. Therefore, the mode can also be applied to diminished chords. As you can see, this is a very versatile scale. Because of its unique sound, it's often used in jazz, fusion, progressive, rock, and more. So the interval are 1, 2, flat 3, sharp 4, 5, flat 6, flat 7, so basically a Dorian with a sharp 4. And the modular arpeggio spells 1, flat 3, 5, flat 7, 9, sharp 11, and 13. So don't forget, sharp 4 is equal to flat 5, and 6 is equal to flat 7. Because as you can see here is how we can use the same scale across 3 different family of chords, which is what makes this scale very versatile. Let's look on the neck, how this translates. So here on the diagram, we have a G Dorian sharp 4. And if we want to look at the chord in terms of G minor, we can highlight these 4 notes. And obviously it's got a very specific sound. Let's see how the sound change in between basically Dorian and Dorian sharp 4. So I'm gonna loop a G minor chord. And this is the sound of Dorian. In this case, we're using the shape of E. Now, the Lydian sharp 4 basically raises the fourth. And as you can see, it adds an interesting color, an interesting variation. And if you think in terms of the variations they can do over Dorian, given what we studied so far, now we start to have 3 possible variations. We have Dorian, then we have Dorian sharp 4, and of course melodic minor, which was basically a Dorian with a major 7. Now let's look instead at the case where we apply the same scale, but in this case, instead of using the 5, we think of the sharp 4 as a flat 5, and now, as you can see, the scale also contains 1, flat 7, flat 3, flat 5, which is an half diminished chord. Now, you have to realize that in terms of half diminished chord, the correct scale in theory would have been, let's make this the root note, it would have been Locrian, so the 7th degree of the major modes, which has these kind of intervals. So obviously, in using Dorian sharp 4 instead, we're kind of bringing some alterations. In this case, the 2nd is an alteration. In the original Locrian, this would have been flat 2. Instead, we have basically a 9. The 6 is also different. Here we have a flat 6, and here we have a major 6. And of course, also the presence of a fifth, which is not available when we play Locrian. Let's have a look at how this sounds like. So if I freeze a G half diminished, the sound of Locrian would be this. So this is the 7th degree of the major modes. If instead I use Dorian sharp 4, you obviously have this sound, as you can see, is already an alteration. This sound is definitely an alteration. I mean, it's a fifth, so you have these two sounds combined. And of course, the 6 is an alteration. So you have 3 alterations out of 7 notes. And the sound of it is this. Right? So you kind of have to be more careful how, on the landing notes, because here you have the arpeggio, which is basically 1, flat 3, flat 5, flat 7. So if I land on this is okay, here is a bit of an alteration. That's okay. That's okay. That's okay. That's okay. Not too bad. Here is the 6th. A third interesting case when it comes to this particular scale is the fact that we also have a diminished chord happening within the scale. And again, the 6, you can think of it as a double flat 7. So here is your diminished chord. If you prefer, you can even see it like this, right? And once again, we need to kind of compare it with the diminished scale to see how, in terms of alterations, what's happening. And the diminished scale will be 1, 2, flat 3, 4, flat 5, flat 6, double flat 7, obviously, major 7, and root note. And once again, in terms of sound, here is a diminished, G diminished. Now let's move on with the PDF. So in the following page, we have the breakdown of the modal arpeggio, which is this, into group of 4 notes, which gives us kind of the chords within. And as you can see, if I take 1, flat 3, 5, flat 7, I'll take G minor 7. And if I take B flat, D, F, and A, so basically B flat, D, F, and A, flat 3, 5, flat 7, and 9, actually that spells like a B flat major 7. And as we will see later on in the PDF, these kind of things will come in terms of creating chord progressions, which can then be used for practice, this particular scale, but isn't like literally for writing music. And of course, like, group of 4 starting from D gives us a D minor major 7, starting from F gives us F major 7 sharp 5, starting from A, we get A7, starting from D flat, we get D flat diminished, and starting from E, we have E minor 7 flat 5. As you will see with the backing track, which is attached to this lesson, we will explore the versatility of the mode by applying it over minor, half diminished, and diminished chord. In the PDF, first we'll have a review of the actual scale shapes, but again, these are basically harmonic minor, cage system, 5 shapes, simply displaced in different areas. So if you study the harmonic minor, this doesn't come as a surprise. It's literally different area of the neck being explored. And in terms of arpeggios, just as a reminder, as you can see, this is 1 on 3 because we're going through minor 7 arpeggios first. Again, as a reminder, we've done this when we've done Dorian. but also minor 7 flat 5 arpeggios, again 2 or 3, again 5 shapes, all in G. And we've done these arpeggios already when we've done Locrian, but it's good to refresh them. Last but not least, we have diminished arpeggios, once again in G. In blue, as always, the chords are all highlighted. This is the modal arpeggio instead. This is strictly connected to the Dorian Sharp 11 mode. And a few pages of chords in all 5 shapes, again in G, needs to be transposed. Beside the chord progression created for the backing track, which we're going to discuss in a second, here is another 3 chord progressions that can be resolved just by using, in this example, G Dorian Sharp 11. Feel free to loop them, have fun playing over them. As you can see, this chord progression, all these chords derive from this particular episode theory. Okay? And so that means, that allows us to practice just one scale while we create some interesting chord progressions, And so I'll show you one. You'll see what I mean. And this time progression resolves it. As you can see, it gets very musical. The chord progression is a bit quirky, obviously, because we're taking chords from the harmonic minor series. So, as you noticed in the PDF, here we have F major 7 and 13, B flat major 7 sharp 11, etc. But as it's still kind of musical. Let's look at progression 2, where you have B flat major 7, B flat minor 6, which are both present in the scale, G minor 7, and G minor 6. Last but not least, to use also the D flat diminished, which we found in the harmonization, here we have a G minor 7 into D flat diminished into F major 7 into D minor 9. And again, D minor 9, all these chords are present in the scale. That's what allows me to play the same scale across the entire progression. Let's loop this and see what it sounds like. So as you can see in devising these chord progressions, I basically used chords and extracted from the scale in a kind of a musical way. It could almost be a song. But that allows us to practice, the scale in a musical way. So once you've gone through the PDF and, refreshed your arpeggios and your scale, you can use this if you can loop them, or as I said, there is a backing track that comes with this lesson. And it can be interesting to look at the backing track, at least the chord progression, for the simple reason that I used a few harmonic devices in order to exploit this idea that we can use the Dorian sharp 4 scale over 3 different families of chords: minor, half diminished, and dominant. Let's have a look 1 second at the PDF. So in terms of harmonic devices, here you have the first 16 bars, which are the same: G minor, Dorian sharp 4, and is resolving into F Ionian. The thinking behind that is a major 2-5-1, and we've done this when we've done the major modes. So if you think of 2-5-1 in the key of F, the chords would be G minor, C7, F major. In this case, we're skipping the C7, so G minor becomes the tension, and F major 7, Ionian, becomes the resolution. And of course, in the PDF, I wrote Ionian, so you're basically moving from G Dorian sharp 4 to basically F Ionian. Right? In the second section here, so from bar 17, and again for 16 bars, instead we're using G minor 7 flat 5, going still again to F major 7. So what's happening there harmonically, the idea behind this instead is to exploit part of the minor 2-5-1, and a minor 2-5-1 which derives from the harmonic minor modes, by the way, where chord number 1 is a minor major 7 chord. So in theory it would have been F minor major 7, and it would have been G half diminished, it's those 2 chords, C7 flat 9, and we would resolve into F melodic minor, so F minor major 7. But in this case, I just borrowed the 2 chord from the minor 2-5-1, but still resolve it into a major chord. So that's something that, especially in jazz, happens all the time. So you have this kind of sound, 2, 5, but then it's major. And again, it's just a tension resolution where G, half diminished, is the tension, and F is the resolution. In the third case study, again we used G minor as a Dorian sharp 4, but as you can see, this time is resolving into D major 7. And the reason we're doing this is because now we're thinking of this G minor as an A7 resolving into D7. So it's a major 5-1. So from the major mode, we would have 5, A7, and D major. But as we've seen in the PDF with the harmony theory for this particular mode, you might have noticed that one of the chords present, in this case in the G Dorian sharp 11, it happens to be A7. Let's look at the neck diagram for a second. So here is a Lydian sharp 4. In this case, I'm using, as you can see from the white dots and the red dots, I'm using the shape of, in this case, the shape of D minor. What's interesting, as I mentioned, is that the scale itself, it does contain an A7. If I make this the root note for a second, you can see we have A, flat 7, 3, flat 5. And in terms of extension, as you can see, you would have a sharp 5 and a sharp 9. But as you can see, in basic terms, the A7 is in there. Now, what I did in terms of tension resolution was I took a G minor and resolve that into D. So the G minor is basically substituting the A7. And the reason I can do that is because by playing G minor, what I'm doing from an A perspective, this is G minor. I'm playing the flat 7, the 11, the sharp 5, and the flat 9. the instead of having this kind of sound, you have this kind of sound, which I'm sure you've heard in songs in general. And that allowed us to have this kind of tension, this time again in G minor, we're using Dorian sharp 4, and then resolution, instead of being F, now the resolution center is D major. And the same is happening here. In this case, if you think in terms of D flat diminished going into a D major 7, it's the same kind of concept. We are still thinking in terms of A7 going into D major 7. And I'll show it to you on the diagram. So you're still thinking in terms of A7, and if you find, here it is, this is G diminished, which is also the D flat diminished. And the way you want to look at it is in terms of, okay, instead of A7, I mean, I'm still playing flat 7, 3, 5. Basically, this is 3 notes of the dominant 7, and you're adding a flat 9, which again is still present in the scale. So in this case, you have this kind of sound, basically like, and from the point of view of the chart, you find it written like this. So as you can see, we used a few harmony and theory concepts to create a backing track, which on one side allows us to use Dorian sharp 4 across all the 3 different family of chords it can be applied to. At the same time, we use it also as an excuse to try different tension resolution and using harmony and theory not to resolve always in F. Basically, in this case, we're resolving in F, we're resolving in D major 7, which makes the backing track a little bit more interesting to play to. And in a second, I'm going to load the backing track so you can hear it. And anyway, of course, it's uploaded for you to download and have fun with it. Before I do that, once again, for the support, I hope you enjoyed the lesson. And until next time, bye.
Thank you.